Some stories don't just end with words. They quietly live on in the shadows. If you dare to step inside, stay until the last breath, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. Every follow and comment is a candle lighting the mysteries yet to be revealed. Part 1, where the moon lights empty graves. I have been here so long, I no longer remember what the winter wind smelled like, or when spring finally arrived. Time, for souls like me, is just a long string of endless nights. I dwell at Hillpine, a cemetery nestled at the edge of town, surrounded by old pines whispering in the wind. The living think Hillpine is quiet, but for us, it's never truly silent. Every night, when the moon rises, thin veils of mist like damp blankets fall over rows of gravestones. That's when we, the wandering spirits, start to leave our places. Floating between cracked stone pathways. Here, there are rules no one wrote down, but everyone understands. Do not touch the living. Do not step into the empty graves, plots freshly dug, waiting to be filled. And absolutely do not interfere with what humans do to each other. I never thought I would break these rules, until the night that boy appeared. It was a late autumn evening, cold winds slipping through stone cracks, carrying the scent of freshly turned earth. From afar, I saw 4 shadows sneak through the side gate, a small gate the caretaker usually left slightly unlocked. 3 walked fast, their steps firm, and 1 boy trailed behind, smaller, shoulders hunched as if trying to shrink away. I drifted along, hiding among the tombstones. Fragments of their voices floated on the wind. You want to join the group? You gotta do all 3 challenges. Easy, I can handle that. Just wait and see. I recognized they were heading toward the north section, a place few dared to enter because the graves there are over 100 years old. But what caught my attention more was a freshly dug hole in the corner. It lay still, holding a sealed wooden box inside, still smelling of fresh wood. I knew immediately this was an empty grave, and our rule is never to step into it, because it belongs to the future, and no one knows who it's for. Other spirits drifted close to me, silently watching. No one spoke aloud, but all saw the flicker in the eyes of the 3 leaders. It was not a playful light, it was something cold. The smallest boy, the newcomer, looked down into the hole, then looked up. How long? One of the 3 replied, voice challenging. 6 minutes, lie still. If you make it, you're one of us. I had seen reckless dares before, but never like this. 6 minutes in a grave, lid closed tight. They were not afraid of ghosts, but of the atmosphere inside, dense and without escape. I intended to turn away, because our law is clear, do not interfere. But my invisible legs stayed, watching the boy step down the dirt steps, eyes trying to look steady. Darkness beneath the earth. The boy stepped into the hole, his shoes coated with damp soil. I heard his quick breaths, though he tried to stay calm. The 3 stood above, looking down like game masters. Lie down, face up, one said. He obeyed, back against the pit's bottom. From where I was, I saw his hands pressed tight at his sides, trying to control the trembling. When the wooden lid lowered, the moonlight vanished, leaving only a thin crack of light slipping through the edge of the boards. I had once lain in a box like that the day I was buried in Hillpine. That feeling, not everyone can survive it. The air thickened fast, the smell of fresh wood mixed with damp earth like a heavy blanket pressing on the chest. The sound of shovels began. Soil dropped with dull thuds on the wooden lid, each strike like a blow to the boy's heart. At first, I heard his breathing stay steady, but after only a few dozen seconds, it grew rapid, uneven. I drifted around the hole, unable to look away. Other spirits kept their distance, watching from afar. They whispered, "Rule forbids interference. If you save him, he will see himself and panic." I knew they were right, but another feeling, one buried deep within me for long, started to rise. It was not mere kindness, It was a memory of the day I lay still, waiting for each shovel of earth to fall, and no one came to save me. Above, the three chuckled softly. They didn't watch their watches, just chatted idly, occasionally tossing handfuls of dirt as if playing in the sand in the dark. The boy tapped lightly on the wooden lid, slowly at first, as if testing for a reaction. No one answered. The tapping grew harder, then turned into frantic pounding. I could feel the change in heartbeat clearly. It was so fast, I felt it pounding in my own chest. The air in the box was thinning, and moisture began weighing heavy on his lungs. I drifted close to the lid, whispering, "Stay calm, breathe slow," but I knew the living cannot hear us. The boy only looked around in the darkness, eyes wide, searching for any light. I saw a tear fall down his temple, soaking into the earth below. Then, suddenly, from afar came a faint light. Rapid footsteps. A woman's voice rang out. "Ethan, where are you?" I recognized the name was his. Flashlights swept across the gravestones. The three above flinched, then stepped back, pretending innocence. But I knew they were terrified, not because they feared for the boy, but because they feared being caught. The footsteps quickened. A worried-faced girl appeared, followed by a tall young man. They looked around, then stopped at the grave. "My God," the girl gasped, dropping to her knees. "Help me dig," the boy shouted. Shovels, hands, even fingernails dug. Soil flew everywhere. Each scoop was a cut through the barrier between him and the air. I drifted back, feeling the invisible rules suddenly lose all meaning. Only seconds later, the wooden lid cracked open. The boy coughed, breathing like someone surfacing from the bottom of the sea. The girl hugged him tightly, tears mixing with sweat. I watched that scene, and for a moment, I almost forgot who I was. When darkness revealed its true face, Ethan sat in his sister's arms, face pale, but eyes wide open. I saw there was more than fear there. There was something else. Awakening. The three stood several dozen steps away, half wanting to leave, half pretending ignorance. But the moonlighted hillpine that night was so bright. Every expression on their faces was clear. "Thank you for coming," Ethan whispered to his sister, voice broken. The boy with the sister stood blocking them. "What are you doing here?" His voice harsh. One of the three shrugged, answering emptily. "Just taking a walk. Nothing else." But I heard their hearts beating, uneven, like those who escaped a fate they should have been caught in. I had drifted close enough to know that coldness in their eyes tonight was not new. When Ethan's sister helped him out the side gate, I hovered behind. The cold wind howled through the pines, carrying whispered voices of other spirits. "Don't interfere anymore. Tonight is lucky. Humans will hurt themselves, then blame ghosts." I should have listened to them, but the image of Ethan, lying in that grave, tapping desperately on the wooden lid, was like a knife carved deep into my memory. The memory of the last day I was still alive. I returned to the north section. The three were still there. They sat on the gravestones, whispering, but loud enough for me to hear every word. "Almost done. You dug faster than I thought. Next time, don't let anyone know. 6 minutes is enough for him to disappear. Right? We don't need weaklings in the group." Suddenly, I understood. This challenge was not harmless. It was not a joke to test courage. For them, it was a way to eliminate. And if sister hadn't come tonight, a cold chill spread through me. Not the cold of night, but the cold of realization. Sometimes, the most dangerous beings in this cemetery are not the spirits. I drifted around, watching them. Their shadows stretched over the grass, twisted like something unhuman. I couldn't touch them, but I could do something else. Something I hadn't tried in a long time. Send images into the dreams of the living. If I couldn't warn Ethan awake, I would let him see the truth while asleep. I would bring him back to the moment in the grave, so he would clearly remember who stood above, silently filling the earth. The moon rose higher, silver light falling on the now filled empty grave. I knew I had broken the rule again, but this time I felt no regret. Thought when dreams become warnings that night, I did not return to my usual place under the pines. Instead, I drifted along the trail leading to town, clinging to Ethan's breath. Souls like me have a way to enter the minds of the living, find when they slip between waking and dreaming. When darkness covered his room, I slipped through the half-open window, standing in a corner. Ethan shifted, sweat wetting his brow, breathing slowing. I moved closer, placing my invisible hand on his forehead. Suddenly, the whole room vanished. Before Ethan's eyes was the grave at Hillpine. The dream space rippled like water. He looked around, realizing he was again inside the wooden box. But this time the small light crack was gone completely. Laughter echoed above, not distorted like memory, but clearer, roar. Three faces looked down, eyes cold as stone. I let him see every detail: who held the shovel, who threw dirt, who stood with arms crossed. Silent but eyes flashing with each beat. Ethan gasped, trying to push the lid, but this time I pulled him out before he suffocated. He looked up, seeing me just a blurry shape, no face. "They are not your friends," I said, voice echoing like wind through stones. "Don't go back." Before he could ask, the dream dissolved. The next day, Ethan woke with a strange feeling. He remembered every detail of the dream, but wasn't sure if it was a dream or a stirred memory. I watched as he avoided old friends, kept distance from the small town. But humans tend to forget when fear cools. Only 3 nights later, on a windy evening, I saw the 3 shadows appear again at Hillpine's side gate. They carried a heavy cloth bag, metal clinking inside. I drifted behind, weaving through the gravestones, until they stopped at the south section, a place few visit because the ground there sinks deep and is hard to walk. They pulled out a small dark wooden box, placing it on a bare patch of earth. One whispered, "This game will be better than last time." They didn't know, just a few rows away, I was watching, and more than that, I was calling other spirits to come. Soon, shadowy figures gathered around me, some familiar faces from Hillpine, even those who never cared about the living. All felt something unusual. "What have they brought this time?" an old spirit asked, voice like the wind through stone cracks. I shook my head, but deep in my cold memories, I knew. Any game that starts at Hillpine at night, with those hands involved, will not stop at scaring. When the box was opened, light burst out. Not warm light, but a dull yellow glow, like fire burning under thick glass. I heard one whisper, "If it catches fire, everything will blaze up." A terrible thought flashed through me. This time, not just one in the grave, but a whole part of the cemetery would become fuel. I realized, if left alone, Hillpine would no longer be a refuge for souls, and I would have to break the rules again, this time not just to save one life. The night of breaking rules, wind whipped through the pines, dry leaves rustling like rapid whispers. I drifted close to the ground, staring at the box glowing dull yellow. The 3 had no idea they were surrounded, not by the living, but by what the living fear most. I signaled to the others. We spoke without words, but the intent was clear. Do not let that fire touch anything at Hillpine. A shadow flickered behind one of the 3, making him jump and turn around. "Who's there?" His voice tense. No answer. But when he turned away, the gravestones behind shifted. Exits blocked like a maze. I and 2 other spirits lowered the temperature, mist rising from the ground, curling around their feet. "What is this?" another muttered, tightening the metal bag. We moved closer. Knowing this moment could not be undone, I blew hard on the oil lamp they placed beside the box, snuffing it out. The dull yellow glow vanished, replaced by thick darkness. Confused footsteps sounded. One tripped, dropping the bag. Inside rolled several small tubes containing cloudy liquid. A sharp smell spread. the scent of something that could ignite dry grass in seconds. I and another spirit blew strong winds, scattering the tubes far away into a damp crack in the earth where fire could not catch. We broke the rules, but in each other's eyes, there was no hesitation. One of the three shouted in panic, "Run!" They left the box and lamp, fleeing headlong toward the side gate. But Hillpine would not let threats leave easily. Mist thickened, hiding all familiar paths. Whispers of spirits echoed everywhere, disorienting them. Finally, they found their way out. But I knew the fear from this night would haunt them long, perhaps longer than their will to return. When the cemetery fell silent again, I looked around. The abandoned box was now just cold wood. No light, no sharp smell. We had kept Hillpine intact, at least until dawn. An old spirit stepped forward, voice like wind through stone cracks. "You know what breaking the rules again means, right?" I nodded. "Yes, but sometimes, worse than being erased from here, is standing by and doing nothing." Pale dawn spread over the gravestones. I returned to my place beneath the pines. Feeling the fading of morning dew at the edge of the cemetery, I caught sight of Ethan standing there. He didn't enter, just stared deep inside, eyes searching for something. Maybe he didn't know, but Hillpine and I owed him, because it was he who made me remember. Sometimes, rules must be broken. There are places feared because they once had ghosts, but there are places even more feared because they once had people, and tonight, Hillpine proved it. Ghosts only scare with darkness. Humans scare each other with rotten souls. Part 2, Echoes Beneath the Dome. My name was Eleanor, or at least, that's what they called me when I still breathed air. Now, I am nothing but a shadowy wisp, drifting through the damp, moss-covered graves of Eastvale Cemetery. Time no longer holds meaning for me. Spring, winter, or bright sunny days all bleed into shades of gray over a decaying canvas. The last day I lived, rain fell softly. My wedding dress trailed on the ground, soaked and heavy with cold. The scent of white roses from the bouquet in my hands mixed with the sharp, metallic tang of blood piercing my senses. I never made it to the chapel. From that moment on, I belonged here, beneath the dome of Eastvale. Nights here are unlike those in the living world. Moonlight slicing through cracks in the ancient stone dome shatters into hundreds of sharp shards, hanging like daggers in the air. The thick atmosphere sucks every sound from the outside world, leaving only the cold drip of water falling from the ceiling onto the stone floor. Each drop echoes like the last heartbeat of someone long gone. This place has its own rules, some spoken, but followed by every restless soul. Never cross the dome's boundary unless your name is called. Never let the living see your true face, or it will haunt their dreams forever. Never interfere with the living unless they trespass into the forbidden zone. That night, I sat on the cold stone steps before my grave when an unusual light seeped through the main gate. It wasn't the soft glow of moonlight, but harsh, flickering beams, flashlights, and camera rigs. I slipped back into shadow immediately. 5 people entered, the scrape of sneakers on gravel, the rustle of nylon jackets. The clatter of tripods and microphones filled the air. They laughed and joked, but their noise sounded jarringly out of place in this domain that only knew the whisper of wind through cracks and tombstones. "Tonight's gonna be a million-view video. Trust me," said a tall guy with a buzz cut, checking his camera. "Eastvale's Ghost Bride." "Just saying it chills you to the bone," Greg sneered. That ghost bride they talked about, that was me. I followed them deeper into the cemetery, the chill rising from the old stone slabs, coiled around their ankles, unnoticed. Their breaths grew heavier, visible in the cold night mist, mingling with the scent of cigarette smoke and plastic cables, breaking the familiar smell of damp earth and fading chrysanthemums. They headed toward the dome, a moss-covered stone. hemisphere with a doorway so low you had to bow to enter. Inside, the air was at least 10 degrees colder. Dampness clung to skin like a thin layer of mud. I drifted silently behind them. Every step echoed twice, thrice, as if something unseen paced with them in the darkness. The newest member, the youngest, clutching the camera tightly, kept glancing over his shoulder. I knew he could feel us. Ephraim, the leader, ordered sharply, "Get a close-up right there by the cracked family tomb. Make sure everyone gets the best shot." The spot he pointed to was a shattered tombstone, plunged into shadow so deep it swallowed all light. I knew what awaited there, and I was not alone in knowing. White shadow in the chill. The newcomer stepped onto the cold stone floor, the scrape of shoes bouncing off every surface. The dome was like a giant clamshell, trapping the smallest sound and stretching it unnaturally, making everything feel wrong. He raised the camera, the LED casting a pale blue-white light over damp stone walls. Thick moss clung like slick animal skin. Occasionally, droplets fell from the ceiling onto his face, each sting like 1,000 needles. Ephraim and Greg stood just outside, their flashlights trained on his back, keeping a cautious distance or watching his reactions. The dome smelled more than just damp earth. Beneath that lay something sickly sweet and sour, wilted flowers, old extinguished candles, and the faint odor of rotting fabric. To the living, it might smell old, but to me, it was the unmistakable sign of things that should never be disturbed. The newcomer took a few more steps, his light sweeping across tombstones. One was mine, a white slab worn at the edges. My name Eleanor, barely legible beneath the grime and moisture. A chill ran down my spine, if I still had one. Then it appeared. From the darkest corner, beside the cracked wall, a white figure slid out. At first, just a thicker mist, but the light revealed her shape, a barefoot girl in a wedding dress. Long tangled hair, skin pale enough to reflect the light. The newcomer froze. His breath came out loud and ragged, loud enough I could almost hear it, but I knew immediately that wasn't me. Her dress was pristine, no sign of age or decay. The lace was perfect, untouched by time stain. Her eyes shone bright, slightly, trembling, alive. She was not a ghost, but a living woman. She lowered her head, then slowly raised it. Her makeup was pale as death, lips stained like diluted blood, strands of hair stuck to her mouth. She stepped toward the newcomer, her bare feet brushing cold stone, as if used to stepping over sharp gravel and slick moss. Outside the dome, Ephraim smirked. Greg bit his lip to hide a laugh. I understood. This was a setup, a staged prank to catch real reactions. The newcomer stepped back, camera shaking, lens drifting away from her face, catching instead a dark corner behind her. There I saw what none of them noticed. A taller figure cloaked in dark, standing motionless. His eyes, two bottomless black pits, watched not the staged act, but the prey. The dome's atmosphere shifted abruptly, colder, heavier. I heard faint wheezing breaths, none belonging to the group. I edged closer to that shadow, and his scent hid me metal, old sweat, and a salty tint of ill intent. In his hand, a curved blade caught the light, dull steel, worn by countless uses. The newcomer's heart pounded, unaware of the threat behind him. Only I knew, and I knew, this moment, every rule of the spirits of Eastvale might be broken by me. When darkness spills out, the newcomer remained transfixed by the fake bride, blind to the horror behind. I circled, trying to stir a breeze to warn him, but my chill only made him shiver, blaming the damp dome air. The cloaked figure took a slow step forward. The only sound, the soft scrape of leather soles on stone, nearly swallowed by the drip from above. To me, every step struck like a warning drum. Clang. The blade scraped a protruding stone, sharp metallic ringing like a knife drawing back. Before the strike, the air tightened. Flashlights outside the dome cut through fog. but their beams were swallowed by thick darkness, as if the shadows were swallowing every stray glimmer. Other spirits inside watched silently, unwilling to break the rules. The fake bride played her part, stepping forward, bare feet sliding on cold stone. The scent of makeup, mixed with old candle wax, drifted off her dress. I passed close, feeling the quickened pulse of her heartbeat, excited, playful, not scared. The newcomer's heartbeat was different. It was erratic, fast, his blood pounding in his ears like a hollow drum in the sealed space. Then he stepped fully from the shadows. The cloaked figure. I caught the hunter's gleam in his eyes. The flashlight glinted cold steel on the curved blade. He didn't attack immediately. Instead, he stood, eyes fixed between the newcomer and the fake bride. I wasn't sure what he intended first, but instinct screamed. Once he moved, no one would react in time. Outside, Ephraim sensed something wrong. His voice called out, "Hey, you guys? You okay?" No answer. Greg chuckled softly, thinking this was the actress's performance. Then the cloaked man moved a step. The scrape of fabric against stone sounded loud. The newcomer turned, reflexively, eyes wide as he saw him. Bang! The blade slashed the air where he stood moments before. The newcomer stumbled back. Camera dropped to stone, lead shattered, flickering out. Darkness swallowed the dome. Only sounds remained. Heavy breaths, heavy footsteps of the cloaked man, the fake bride's dress brushing the floor, water dripping, mixing with chaos. I had no time to hesitate. I lunged, wrapping icy fingers around his wrist. He froze, not from seeing me, but a cold fire burning through bone, numbing his joints. The curved blade clattered to the floor, sharp and dry, sliding away. The newcomer scrambled to his feet, running toward the faint light of the dome's entrance. Ephraim and Greg recoiled in panic as he burst out, followed by the fake bride, who had pulled off her veil, gasping. The cloaked man stood in the dome's heart, head turning, eyes still endless black pits. I knew he wouldn't give up so easily. When the dome opens, the newcomer burst out of the dome's doorway, but he lost his footing. His feet slipped on the slick, moss-covered stones. His body crashed hard onto the cold gravel. The dry thud echoed sharply. Pebbles scattered in every direction. The chill of the earth seeped through his thin jacket. It crawled up his spine like countless icy needles piercing flesh. He struggled to sit up. His lungs burned from ragged breaths. His heart pounded so loud that his ears rang. It drowned out everything except the pounding drum of blood in his head. Right behind him, the fake bride rushed out. Her white wedding dress dragged across the gravel with a rustling sound, like a burial shroud being pulled. Her bare feet were smeared with dirt, stained with faint red streaks, mingling with the damp soil. The air around her was thick with the stench of sweat, cheap makeup, and the faint lingering scent of long-extinguished candle wax. She gasped for breath, but her eyes gleamed with excitement. She was convinced she had just nailed the perfect shot for their video. Ephraim and Greg stood frozen at the edge of the stone steps. Their flashlights illuminated the newcomer's face. His pupils were wide, dilated, twisted, with raw, primal terror. They opened their mouths to speak, but before they could, a sound rang out from inside the dome. At first, heavy footsteps grinding against stone, slow, steady. Each step thickened the heavy air around them. The echoes stretched unnaturally. It felt as if more than one person were approaching. Alongside the footsteps came a dragging noise, a harsh screeching sound of metal scraping stone. It tore apart the silence. A metallic temps flooded the air. The cold breath of fear. Greg's flashlight trembled in his grasp. A shadowy figure cloaked in dark stepped onto the threshold. He didn't rush out. He stood half in light, half in shadow. The faint glow revealed a sharp chin and a thin, chilling smile. The newcomer slid backward. His hands fumbled on the gravel. His fingers found a cold stone and gripped it tight. Ephraim stepped forward halfway to shield him, but Greg grabbed Ephraim's shoulder, pulling him back. His eyes never left the dark figure. The fake bride retreated as well. Her excitement vanished, replaced by raw, primal fear, the instinct to flee a hunter. I hovered between them and him. I knew I was about to break the rules again, but I also knew, if I didn't, there'd be a new restless soul in Eastvale tonight. The rules are broken. The figure took another step out of the dome. Greg's flashlight swept over the cold steel of a curved blade, loosely held in his hand. The metal vibrated with a faint hiss, like a serpent ready to strike. I felt waves of cold emanating from him, but this was no ghost's chill. It was the cold of intention, the mind of a predator used to inflicting harm. It clung to the air, like burning oil smoke, seeping into every crack. The newcomer tried to stand, but his legs trembled. Ephraim backed away. His eyes flickered between the man and the exit. Greg's facade cracked. His hand squeezed the flashlight until knuckles whitened. The fake bride shivered, not from the night wind, but from the icy gaze of the cloaked man locking onto her. I knew the rules, no direct interference, but I also knew those laws only held when the living hadn't crossed the boundary, and he, with his sick light in his eyes, had gone far beyond. I moved fast, wrapping icy fingers around his wrist. Cold bit into his veins. His fingers twitched. The curved blade clattered to the stone floor with a sharp clang. He growled hoarsely. His eyes flickered, as if trying to see what had touched him. Ephraim shouted, "Run!" Greg grabbed the newcomer. The three sprinted toward the gate. The fake bride lagged, but I could feel him intending to chase her first. I released his wrist and swung hard at Greg's flashlight. The beam flashed like a warning signal from the shadows between ancient tombstones. Two other spirits appeared, souls rarely leaving their posts. A man in a 40s vest holding a cracked ceramic cup. A woman with her hair in a high bun, eyes milky like fog. They said nothing, only moved closer to him. When he glanced at them, the chill thickened. He didn't see them clearly, only chaotic shadows moving with a will of their own. He stumbled, back gasping, then suddenly turned and fled into the woods, leaving the dome to echo with fading footsteps. When the cemetery gates slammed shut behind them, I drifted back inside the dome. None of the YouTubers saw me, nor did they know what they'd barely escaped. They'd tell the story their way, turn it into a video, or erase it from memory, alone in the darkness. My wedding dress fluttered in a distant breeze. I whispered to myself, the living are far scarier than we are, because inside them lies a part even they refuse to face. And the dome settled back into its silence, waiting for the next soul bold enough to step inside. Part 3, The Man with the Coffee Cup, from a Spirit's View. My name is Walter, or I used to be Walter. Now, I am nothing but a shadow lurking in the basement of Southbridge Station, where the last train left over half a century ago. The day I left the living world, it was raining steady. In my hand, a steaming cup of coffee. Its warmth was the last thing I felt before the train's whistle blew, and darkness swallowed everything. Night. Southbridge is unlike anywhere else, not just because the trains have stopped running, but because the whole place feels sealed inside an old, stale breath. The distant hum of the city never reaches down here, only the drip of water from rusty rails, and the faint creak of old wires swaying in the draft from the tunnel's mouth. The cold here is unique. It smells of damp steel, machine oil decades old, and a faint trace of coffee, brewed long ago, but still lingering somewhere. The spirits here follow strict rules. Never step up the stairs leading to the street unless called by name. Never touch anything belonging to the living. Never interfere with the living unless they come down during the quiet hour, when darkness thickens enough to swallow flashlight beams. I lived by these rules for over 50 years, until the night they came. 4 men in dark coats descended the stairs, their steps heavy, paced slow, like hunters confident they control the scene. One carried a black leather bag, bulging at the center. Another held a powerful flashlight, sweeping its beam across the tunnel's ceiling, casting long shadows of hanging wires that looked like hundreds of snakes suspended midair. The leader was the man I never forgot. He held a paper coffee cup, and that coffee smell, hot, strong, freshly brewed, tore through my memories, pulling me back to the last night of my life. With a cup just like that. He stopped in the middle of the platform, set the coffee cup on a rotting wooden bench, then signaled the others to unzip the leather bag. The zipper's slow scrape echoed deliberately, as if meant to spread sound far and wide. I drifted closer, hiding in the dark near the rusty rail tracks. The coffee aroma wrapped around me, both warm and suffocating. Inside the bag, gloves, a rope, and a folded white cloth. I didn't need to guess. Tonight, Southbridge Station was about to gain a new story. Footsteps on the old platform, they spoke little. Only the sharp clack of leather soles on cracked tile echoed through the tunnel, each step dry and harsh, bouncing back from stained concrete walls. I stood at the platform's edge, behind a burnt-out lamppost, safely away from flashlight beams. The cold from the rails seeped through cracks between tiles, weaving into every shadowed corner. I heard the drip, drip, drip of water from the tunnel's ceiling, hitting puddles below, a silent, steady metronome counting down. The man with the coffee still hadn't taken a sip. He placed it carefully on the old bench, letting the heat rise and mix with the thick stench of old grease and rusted metal. The strong coffee scent spread through the station, and I saw other spirits begin to gather at the edge of my sight. They were drawn to it, because here, anything carrying a strong memory shines like a beacon to us. Another man pulled a phone from the bag, switched on video mode, but covered the screen's light. I heard a faint vibration as he set it on a metal ledge beside the tracks, aiming straight at the platform's center. I moved to the left to see better. The flashlight beam passed and I caught a glimpse of another figure, not part of the 4 men, huddled in the dark corner near the tool storage door. A young man in a gray hoodie, ripped jeans at the knees, white sneakers dirtied by work, his hands tied tightly behind him with plastic straps, his mouth gagged with silver duct tape. His breath came fast, steaming faintly in the cold air, his eyes wide, pupils dilated with panic. The man with the coffee approached him. Heavy footsteps clattered on the platform. He bent down, placing the steaming cup right before the young man's face, close enough that the heat fogged part of the tape. No words were spoken, only the coffee swirled softly as he turned the cup, like a ritual. I smelled the hot brew spreading stronger, awakening another memory. The night I died here, on this very platform, with a coffee cup placed before me. From above, wires trembled, faintly. Cold wind slipped down the tunnel's mouth, bringing muffled noises from the world above, distant car horns, a metal door slamming shut. But down here, those sounds were warped, as if filtered through deep water. I saw other spirits, gathering closer. They didn't step into the light, only lingered on the edge of darkness, their milky eyes tracking every move of the living men. No one spoke, but the air thickened. I knew they all awaited a moment. The ritual of the coffee sent the man with the coffee straightened, his eyes gleaming with something unnatural, a cold, nearly fevered focus. He motioned. 2 others stepped forward, dragging the young man from the dark corner into the platform's open space. The plastic straps scraped, clicking. The young man's sneakers scraped weakly on the tiles, uneven and broken. The duct tape muffled all resistance, leaving only strangled, choking sounds. The man picked up the coffee cup, lifting it to the young man's face. The hot aroma flooded the air, sharp and bitter. I felt it seep into my ethereal fibers, but beneath the coffee scent, I detected something else. A faint herbal sweetness, mingled with ash like the smell of ancient mountain rituals. where elders brewed offerings for the dead. One of them began chanting low, slow, repeating syllables in a language I didn't know. The sound echoed off the tunnel walls, reverberating like the endless depths of the station. His chant blended with the drip, drip, drip of water and the circular footsteps pacing around the captive. I saw their spirits twitch. They disliked this sound in our world. Some utterances, if spoken correctly, can open cracks between layers of darkness, fissures we usually avoid. The man with the coffee tilted the cup, poured a bit of thick black liquid onto the tile floor in front of the boy. Steam rose up. The coffee smell, now twice as strong, blending with the herbs into a thick scent, covering the whole station. I saw a thin gray mist begin to gather over the coffee puddle. It swirled slowly, as if trying to form a shape. The young man started trembling hard, his eyes darting constantly, looking at something the living could not see. The chanting sped up, their breathing synchronized, deep and heavy. A strange shadow began to spread from the corner of the station, slowly, like oil spreading on water, swallowing every patch of light from the flashlights. I stepped back a little, not from fear, but because I realized they were trying to call a being even the Southbridge spirits did not want to face. When the crack opened, the gray mist on the coffee puddle began swirling faster. Its edges sharpened, as if trying to connect into a shape. The air in the station suddenly grew thick, so heavy that even I, an invisible shadow, felt it hard to move. The tied young man was pulled to kneel close to the puddle. The sound of plastic ropes rubbing skin made a faint crackling. The heat from the coffee rose to his face, but instead of warmth, it was freezing cold. So cold that his breath turned into a thick white mist. The chanting slowed, each syllable now clearer, deeper, and each echo seemed sucked into the darkness under the tracks. The flashlight beams flickered, not because the batteries were weak, but because the surrounding darkness was compressing. Pushing the light away at the corner of the station, I saw an old spirit who had lived in Southbridge for decades, trembling. She shook her head, retreated, deeper into the shadows, whispering to me, "Walter, do not stand near the crack." But I did not move back, because I knew this crack opened not only to call a spirit, it was prepared to hold someone back. And tonight, the one being held would be the young man kneeling there. The gray mist finally formed a shape, not clear, like a person, but with long, thin parts like arms, stretching out, sweeping the tile floor. Every time they touched, the stone turned icy cold, covered with a thin layer of frost. The young man jerked violently, his eyes wide open, clearly seeing it. The man with the coffee smiled, the smile of someone standing in the success of a ritual. He reached into his coat, pulled out something like an old coin, and dropped it into the coffee puddle. A ting sound rang out, and that thing tilted its head, as if receiving a signal. Darkness began crawling up the young man's legs. Like spreading ink, it wrapped around his ankles, calves, then tightened slowly, but nothing could loosen it. His heartbeat raced wildly, echoing through the station. I felt it not only as sound, but as if the beat was vibrating in the air, shaking every tile. I knew my time to hesitate was over. If I intervened, Southbridge's laws would see me as a boundary breaker, and I could be cast out, or worse, dragged into the very crack they were opening. But if I did not act, he would vanish into the darkness, and the man with the coffee would leave. Searching for another prey, I stepped forward, into the last beam of flashlight. No more hiding. The last coffee cup I walked straight into the middle of the station. The cold from me swept over, making the flashlight flicker immediately. The living could not see me, but they felt it. One jerked, glanced around, hands tightening the rope, as if it were the only weapon against an invisible fear. That thing still tightened around the young man. Its thin arms now climbed to his chest, each long finger digging into the gaps between heartbeats. He bowed, his head, breathing broken, almost fainting. The man with the coffee bent down, about to place his hand on the boy's shoulder, as if to offer him to the dark crack. I rushed in. I could not touch him like the living, but I could touch what he was holding. I pushed the coffee cup hard. The thick black liquid spilled out, flowing onto the floor, spreading beyond the ritual circle. The coffee herb scent flared up, but instead of feeding the dark crack, it diluted, vanished into the cold air. That thing staggered, its form fading, its thin arms retreating. The cold wind howled from the darkness. Like the cry of a beast interrupted mid-meal, the living group panicked. One threw the rope, another backed against the wall. The man with the coffee growled, rushed to grab the cup, but his hand passed through the cold mist I left. He recoiled, skin pale blue, joints trembling uncontrollably. I blocked him between himself and the young man, trying to keep the dark crack from swallowing more of the boy. Other spirits from the edge of darkness began moving in, forming a silent circle around the living group. We said nothing, just stood there. But every opaque white eye compressed the air to the point it was hard to breathe. The dark crack slowly shrank, pulled back to where it came from. The thin fingers dissolved into smoke, then vanished completely. The young man collapsed onto the floor, coughing harshly, breathing heavily. When the crack closed completely, a cold wind swept through the station, carrying away the scent of coffee and herbs, leaving only the smell of rusty steel and old rainwater. The man with the coffee looked around. He knew the ritual had failed. He said nothing, only signaled the group to retreat. The sound of leather shoes echoed, fading toward the stairs, then lost in the echo of the dark tunnel. The young man was left alone. I looked at him, unable to untie the ropes, but I knew when he was more awake, he would find his way out of here, and perhaps, like me long ago, he would carry the memory of coffee for the rest of his life. I returned to my corner of the station. Other spirits had dispersed. No one spoke of what had just happened. I looked at the dark spot where the crack once opened, whispering softly. There are places scary because they had ghosts, but there are places even scarier because they once had people. And then, the sound of drip, drip, from the ceiling became the only rhythm in the darkness. Part 4. The room without windows. I have been here for a very long time. Too long to remember clearly who I once was. Too long to tell the wind's sound from breathing. Saint Elora Hospital has been abandoned for nearly 40 years. People in town call it the Hollow because this whole place seems to swallow sound. Footsteps echoing down the long hallways die out after only a few meters, as if the air here refuses to let noise exist. I do not wander the whole hospital. I stay in one room, the room without windows, on the 3rd floor, east wing. The windows have long been sealed shut, and outside is a dark, old brick wall. The only light that gets in comes from a narrow crack by the door, but it is always dim and dusty. In this room, the smell of damp mold mixes with the scent of disinfectant, rotted into a sharp, heavy odor, so thick I am sure it has seeped into every brick, every thread in the bedsheets. The spirit world in St. Elora is unlike anywhere else I have heard of, even though my memories of elsewhere are only fragments. The rules here are simple, but absolute. Do not leave your room during the day. Do not call the living by name. Do not respond when they call. The reason is simple. This place once held those doctors did not want to release outside. That night, I heard footsteps, not like the noisy ghost hunters who often come. This was 3 people, light but purposeful steps. The sound of sneakers hitting tile, the clatter of backpack straps, and the click-click of handheld flashlights. They stopped outside my room. I knew, because the cold air inside the room suddenly pushed back, replaced by warm air from the hallway, flowing in through the door crack. Then, a young female voice spoke. "Hey, is anyone in there?" Breath in the dark. The door opened with a long creak of the hinge, the sound echoing, then swallowed up. Nothing else remained, except the rapid heartbeats of 3 people. The flashlight beams swept the room. Dust rose in layers in the light, slowly swirling as if stirred by an invisible hand. The stained bedsheets were blotched and yellowed. The metal table in the corner still bore a circular stain, like from a glass jar once placed there. The young woman, hair tied back, camera in hand, was the first to enter. Her shoes tapped sharply on the tile, a dry, clacking sound, and I could hear every speck of dust fall from the ceiling as she moved. Behind her was a thin, tall man, carrying a large backpack. He held a flashlight, sweeping slowly, the light flickering as his hand trembled slightly. The third, bigger man stood at the doorway, as if instinctively guarding an exit. They spoke quietly, but in this room, every syllable felt right next to my ear. "It's just a normal hospital room," the thin man said. "But why are there no windows?" The young woman whispered almost. I heard their breaths, short, broken, and I also heard another breath, heavier, slower, not theirs. The young woman stepped closer to the bed. When the light passed over, she frowned. On the old sheets were long, parallel, dense, like someone had gripped the edge tightly, then pulled hard to one side. She reached out to touch on the moment her finger met the fabric. I saw her skin prickle, her heartbeat quicken. The big man at the door sniffed. "What's that?" "Smell, like metal." He was right. That smell had been here a long time, hidden beneath the mold and disinfectant, ready to rise at the slightest fresh breeze. To me, it was not just the smell of metal, but the memory of nights when someone screamed, then fell silent. They still had not seen me, but I stood right beside the metal table, only a few steps from them, and in this room, a few steps distance is enough to change everything. When the darkness moves closer, the young woman placed the camera on the metal table. The tripod clicked dryly, the sound stretching oddly, then fading. She took a deep breath, perhaps to calm herself, but as she exhaled, her breath mixed with another, thicker, heavier, colder. The thin man swept his flashlight across the room. The white light scanned the walls, glided over the bed, then stopped in the shadowed corner, where wall met floor. He frowned. These marks look like claw scratches. In that corner, long gouges were deeply cut into the old paint, exposing gray concrete beneath. Each scratch pointed downward, as if someone clung to the wall. Dragged down to the floor, the big man still stood by the door, but now leaned slightly inside, eyes fixed on the dark space under the bed. He spoke softly, but his deep voice carried clearly throughout the room. "I hear something." They fell silent immediately. Then, for a few seconds, there was nothing but heartbeats and the soft rustle of backpack straps against jackets. Then, a clack, a small sound, like metal lightly striking metal, came from beneath the bed. The young woman aimed the camera under the bed. The flashlight beam shone into the narrow dark space, filled with dust and cobwebs. Nothing but the lens caught a thin mist, appearing only in a few frames, then vanishing. I knew they could not see it with the naked eye, but I saw because it had been here before I arrived. The cold in the room suddenly thickened. Dust slowed, nearly suspended in the air. The flashlight flickered slightly, though the hand holding it did not tremble. The thin man swallowed dryly, trying to appear calm. "Okay. Once we finish filming, we leave." But no one moved, because just as he finished speaking, the door slammed behind the big man, shutting tight. No way out. The door's bang echoed in the narrow room, bouncing off the 4 walls like waves trapped inside a sealed jar. The big man lunged forward, twisting the doorknob. No movement. He slammed his shoulder against the door, again and again. In vain. The woman gripped the camera tighter. The flashlight's beam began to flicker, not from low battery, but because the darkness was eating it. Patches of shadow crawled from the corners, clinging to the light like oil soaking into cloth. Wherever the light dimmed, cold air rushed in immediately. The thin man swept the flashlight around the room. The light glided over the walls, stopped at the corner with claw marks. He stepped back. The scratches had just grown longer. Right before their eyes, new grooves appeared, paint flakes falling to the floor. Though no one touched the wall, suddenly, clack-clack, the sound came again from under the bed. But this time not alone. It was like dozens of metal objects striking each other, speeding up, pounding like chains being pulled tight. The woman leaned over the camera, trying to zoom in on the dark space below the bed. The lens trembled, focusing. Then a black shape, thin like a rope, slithered out. It did not crawl fast. It moved as if knowing no one could escape. With every motion, dust on the floor swirled, forming small whirlpools. The damp mold smell changed to a strong metallic scent, bitter in the throat. The big man backed against the wall, clenching a small knife pulled from his backpack. But I knew the knife could not touch it, just as they could not touch me. The thin man shone, the flashlight straight at it. The light passed through, revealing not a body, but a hollow space. A human-shaped hole, deep and dark, inside which blurred motion flowed backward like water. Only then did they realize what was in the room did not want to chase them away. It wanted to stay with them. When the hollow swallowed the light, the woman pressed back against the metal table. The camera kept running, but the screen was distorted. Horizontal and vertical streaks flashed quickly, blending real images with flickering, confusing frames. Pristine white bedsheets, someone lying on them, hands gripping tightly. Then back to the present scene. The thing under the bed fully emerged. It did not step or crawl. It slid, like a shadow ripped from its host. No footsteps, but the tile floor trembled slightly, dust rising from cracks. The big man screamed, lunging forward to stab. The blade passed through the hollow and instantly rusted, its surface mottled as if corroded for decades in a single breath. He dropped the knife, retreated into the corner, eyes wide, chest heaving as if about to burst. The thin man tried to shine the flashlight on it. The trembling light reflected off the hollow surface, and in that light, I saw faces, faint and blurred, mouths wide open in silent screams, eyes bulging, then swept away into the swirling inside the hollow. The woman gasped, stepping back, her back hitting the wall. She turned toward the door, pounding it hard. "Open, please." But the door stayed silent. The hollow began to stand upright, its shape now like a tall person. Thin shoulders, head tilted as if watching. It did not advance quickly, but with every step, the flashlight's light weakened by half. When it reached the middle of the room, the flashlight went out completely. Only darkness remained. In the darkness, I heard the three breathing. Then, one by one, their breaths stopped. Not instantly vanished, but stretched thin, then extinguished completely, leaving a perfect silence. Then the door burst open. The hallway outside was pitch black, not a single ray of light entering. The room returned to normal, with only the heavy scent of metal lingering in the air. I stood alone. No three people, no flashlight, only dust floating in the faint light that slipped through the door crack. I knew the room without windows had just swallowed three more living souls, and like all who came before them, they would remain in blurry shapes inside the hollow. To guard this room, I turned my face to the wall, whispering, "There are places scary because they had ghosts, but there are places scarier still because they held on to the living." Beneath the bed sheets, the clack-clack sound rang out again like a greeting from the room to the next one who would open its door. Part 5, The Last Light. I don't know how long I've been at Red Creek. All I know is when I arrived, the village was abandoned. Doors closed tight, roofs covered in moss, and wild grass spilling over the stone paths. No one lives here. Number voices, no barking dogs, no crackling firewood. Only the wind whistling through the cracks and the water from the nearby stream. But one thing remained, A lantern hanging in front of the last house in the village. A faint yellow light flickering in the wind, like a small flame struggling to survive amid the thick darkness. The spirits in Red Creek are few. We don't gather or talk. Each of us clings to a corner, holding on to a fragment of old memories. The only rule here: don't approach the house with the lantern. No one explains why, but I have seen anyone who stands under that light too long, by morning, disappears. Without a trace, that night, I heard a strange sound. Not the wind, nor the footsteps of deer. It was the soft clinking of metal, clink-clank like the iron hooks swaying when the lantern swings. Then, from afar, the yellow light shone brighter than usual. No longer a faint spot, but a wide round glow, swallowing the darkness around. It dot, and in that light, I saw 4 people stepping into the village. When the light calls a name, 4 walked on the slippery wet stone path. Their shoes splashed on puddles left by the rain. At first, their conversation echoed faintly, but deeper inside, the sounds seemed swallowed. Only breathing and dry grass brushing against each other remained. The leader was a man around 40, wearing a gray windbreaker, carrying a large backpack. He held a flashlight, but did not turn it on, only staring at the yellow light at the end of the village. His eyes didn't blink, as if pulled toward it. The woman behind him clutched her phone, filming constantly. Whenever she swung the camera aside, the screen recorded leaning houses, dark windows. But when aimed at the lantern, the lens flared so brightly, everything else around sunk into darkness. The other 2 were young men. They whispered softly, but their voices sounded distant, even though I stood right beside them. One looked up at the lantern, shuddered, rubbing his arms. It's getting brighter, right? The other nodded slightly. They didn't realize, but I clearly saw, the light from the lantern was breathing. It swelled then, contracted slowly, like the chest of a living creature. When they reached the village center, the wind shifted. The air carried a strange smell, not the damp rot of the old wooden houses, but the scent of kerosene mixed with something acrid, heavy, a smell I'd known for a long time. The smell of burnt clothes. The woman frowned, asking, "Does anyone smell something burning?" The man in the windbreaker didn't answer. He just kept walking faster, eyes locked on the lantern. I followed quietly, with each of their steps. The light swelled a bit more. The darkness around the village contracted, retreating, as if pushed away by an invisible force. But I knew well, this light was not chasing away the darkness to protect them. It was opening a path, leading them closer. The last house in the village. They stopped before the house. Its wooden walls were faded and peeling. The roof slanted to one side, nearly collapsing, but the lantern hanging at the door glowed brightly, spotless, without dust or cobwebs. The flame inside flickered gently, emitting a steady crackling sound to clear in a place that should be completely silent. The man in the windbreaker stepped forward, reaching out to touch the lantern dot. I wanted to scream, but the cold wind swirling around me sealed my mouth. His finger barely touched the metal and froze. He pulled back, looking at his fingertip. The skin was flushed red, as if he'd touched something hot, but he didn't cry out in pain, only smiled softly. The woman turned the camera toward the door. The lens focused, and in that moment, I saw her reflection on the screen, standing right behind me, though she was still in front of the door. That reflection smiled, lips moving as if saying something. She frowned, wiped the lens, thinking it was just a smudge. The two young men stepped to the sides, shining there, lights on the windows. Inside was pitch dark, but something flickered, like reflections from eyes. They moved slowly, from one side to the other, matching the breathing rhythm of those outside. The younger boy stepped back, swallowing hard. There's someone inside. The man in the windbreaker turned the doorknob. The hinges creaked loudly, and the smell of burning smoke mixed with faint heat spilled out. wrapping around the group. The light from the lantern expanded, spreading inside the house like a pale golden mist. The shadows of all four were cast on the floor, but when they stepped inside, the shadows did not follow. They remained frozen at the doorway. The fire that never dies inside. The house was pitch black, the air thick with the smell of old smoke and burnt wood, as if the fire had just happened a few hours ago, not decades past. Each step they took crunched on the layer of ashes covering the floor. The woman swung the camera. The screen's light revealed dark, layered handprints on the walls, stretching from floor to ceiling. There were large prints, like adult hands, and smaller ones like children's. All pointed toward the center of the room, where a half-burnt wooden table still stood tall. The man in the windbreaker placed his hand on the table. When his fingertips touched the wood, a faint sound echoed click. The flame inside the lantern outside flickered brighter, and I saw it where his hand touched the table. The wood oozed a dark liquid, spilling down onto the floor. The two young men near the window aimed their flashlights outside, but instead of the village path, they saw only a thick yellow mist. No houses, no trees, just a blurred void, slowly swirling. The woman stepped closer to the table. The camera focused on an object in the middle, a half-broken ceramic bowl, still holding black ashes mixed with tiny shimmering bits like broken glass. She reached out to touch it, but just as her finger hovered a few centimeters away, the ashes inside suddenly swirled, as if a breath blew from beneath. The whole house shook gently. The lantern's light poured in stronger, casting everything in amber yellow. Their shadows on the walls stretched long, twisted, detaching from their bodies. The man in the windbreaker looked around, whispering to himself, "It needs more." I felt clearly that now the lantern was no longer just a hanging object. It was the mouth of an entity, and this house was its stomach. The fire never dies, because it burns with whatever steps inside and never leaves. When the lantern is full, the yellow flame flooded the room like water. No longer soft light, it erupted into swirling bands of light, wrapping around their legs like burning ropes. They struggled, but every movement only tightened the glow's grip. The woman dropped the camera. It rolled across the floor, capturing distorted images, hands stretched unnaturally long, faces crushed into a mass, and empty eyes. I heard her gasping, then that breath merged with another sound, a long whistle, like wind blowing through a bottle's neck. The two young men tried to run to the door, but when they reached the threshold, outside was no longer Red Creek Village, only a blazing yellow void, thick and swirling, slowly like a giant opening eye. They stopped, trembling. Then the light swallowed them whole. The man, in the windbreaker, still stood in the middle of the room. He didn't resist, just lifted his face, eyes reflecting the flame. He whispered, "My turn." The light embraced him gently, almost tenderly. Then his form dissolved into the fire, leaving only a thin layer of ash mixed with shards of glass on the floor. The flame retreated from the house, returning to the lantern outside. It shrank back into a faint yellow glow, swaying in the wind. As if nothing had happened, the smell of smoke faded, leaving only damp grass and the distant sound of the stream. I stepped onto the porch, looking at the lantern. Inside, among the flame, I saw 4 new shadows. They faded, blending into dozens of others already there, all held back so the light would never go out. I turned away, stepping into the village's darkness. There are places that are scary, because they once held ghosts. But Red Creek is scarier, because its fire lives on the breath of those still alive. And as I disappeared, the clinking sound of iron hooks rang again, an invitation for the next soul to get lost here.